Weekly update for Friday, May 10th. And, excuse me, as promised, our feel-good self-publishing story, Starro, Zagarro, by Michael Battaglia, Slumbering Agartha Books and Comics. So we're just going to dive right in here with the inside flap. Starro Zagarro was started in 2001, 18 years ago as of this writing. At that time, most cartoonists weren't using computers to generate the lettering. At least nobody that I respected. Ouch. With the one exception of Paul Pope, who, with his book Heavy Liquid, was the first to employ the process in a fashion that didn't come off as cheap or distracting. Nowadays, nobody is hand lettering that I'm aware of, not even the greatest letterer of all time, Dave Sim. Ouch. Why do I bring this up? I quit doing comics, which were, for me, a labor of love, because of how much I loathed having to hand letter the pages. My disdain for lettering was greater than my overarching love of cartooning. Ouch. But digital lettering wasn't an option I was even willing to consider. When I was about halfway through completing this book, I got my hands on a How to Make Comics Like a Pro guide created by the great Daniel Clowes. In it was a breakdown of how to letter like a professional. I began utilizing that method, and if you look for it, you will be able to tell which pages I did before and after reading that pamphlet. And that's true. Over the ensuing months, I found myself in a state of despair because the level of quality of my lettering had vastly improved by the time that I began the comic, so much so that the work appeared uneven to my eyes. So I began going back and completely redoing older pages. But it only seemed to make it worse until I got it in my mind that it was a giant mess, a poorly wrought, unprofessional pile of slop. Well, don't sugarcoat it, Michael, give it to us straight. I shared my dilemma while visiting a close friend named Adam Glack in Colorado. Glack or Clack? I can't see that. He suggested I get away from the work for a few months and revisit it with a fresh eye, and he offered to hold the originals in safekeeping for the duration. I agreed, and he stored them in a cool, dark place. Life happened, and the months turned into years, and the originals remained in darkness for close to 2 decades, until 6 months ago when I received a text from Adam. It was a scan of one of the pages now in this book, accompanied by the question, remember this? And my jaw gaped in disbelief. Did I draw that? It looked amazing to me, nothing at all like the mess I had thought it was all those years ago. Screw the lettering. I loved it. So I asked Adam if he would be kind enough to scan all the originals and email them to me, and he did. And here we are, almost 20 years later, with one of the very few hand-lettered comics to be published on the cusp of 2020. With love, Michael Battaglia, February 2019. And this is from Michael's cover letter to me, dated April 17th, 2019. Well, here's the penultimate edition of my new, it was in brackets and quotation marks, new 70-page graphic novel. The final retail edition is forthcoming and will be a more substantial run. This current run of 50 signed and numbered books is for my GoFundMe donors, which is ongoing, and is currently the only way for people to order a copy. www.gofundme.com/Starro Starro, Zagarro. And you can see how it's spelled right there. Starro, Zagarro. And for a handful of people who are important to me, and I must be pretty important because I got copy number 2. I'm not thrilled with how the black and white covers came out. See, you're doing it again, Michael. The black and white cover is great. The final edition will have full color covers, and it won't have the smarmy thank yous or the dedication or the quote about the history of this book unquote blurb. I think that's great. That's why I read the blurb here, because it's great. Never mind. The final retail version is what all future donors will receive. A few months ago, I asked redundantly, yes, thank you, for your permission to use the big, round, glowing, white, strange thing, which became merely, quote, winged orb, unquote, and isn't nearly as cool. No, it's very cool. It's your thing, which is really what's cool about it, but serves the purpose of covering up what was there before. I'll spare you the details, although I think you have a copy of the originals somewhere. Yes, they're in the correspondence file from 2001. The last remaining debauchery is the gardener in her panties. But it's necessary for the story, as the protagonist is having his 3 biggest sins, lust, gluttony, and envy, burned away by his guardian angel. He's just, lots of U's there, just narrowly, quote, making it, unquote, into heaven with an assist. So those last 2 seconds of his life are quite valuable. And let me take issue with you right there. The gardener is not in her panties. The gardener is wearing a short skirt and is bent over gardening, and her panties are visible. That's a very different thing, I think. Particularly if what you're saying is one of his biggest sins is lust. The problem is the lust that he is bringing to a non-sexual situation. That's my take on it. The gardener is not bent over gardening so he can see her panties. The gardener is bent over gardening because she's gardening. Looking at her panties is his problem. So if we're talking about hinging on the last 2 seconds of his life, and it's a really great part of the book when you realize that that's what's going on. That's a problem that I think he has to address. The gardener has nothing to do with you. She's gardening, she's wearing a short skirt. Yes, her panties are exposed. That is not her saying, hey, look at me in my panties. Am I right? Am I right on this, or am I wrong? Anyway, Starro, Zagarro, it's an amazing book. I will flip through it for you here. It's got a real Charles Burns quality to it in terms of the graphics. But I can certainly understand why 18 years later he would go, why did I think this was a mess? It's definitely not a mess. It's particularly with how little reading time that I have. When it came in, it's like I flipped through it and I went, oh, okay, this one I can read. This is probably going to take all of 10 or 15 minutes. It's mostly very, very big pictures and the hand lettering and the gardener in her panties, and not in her panties. She's in a short skirt and she's gardening. Let's get our minds right on this one. Anyway, heartily recommended. And one of those, don't let that happen to you. Don't decide that something that you put that much time and effort into in the prime of your creative years is a giant mess and you never want to look at it again. Someday you'll go back and look at it and go, why can't I draw like that now? Man, it's got a real spontaneous quality, and it's exactly the kind of graphics that I like. It's Michael, you could have spent 18 years building from these 70 pages to whatever you would have built towards. And instead you just went, no, it's a big pile of crap, throw it away. Good thing that instead of throwing it away, you threw it to the friend of yours who stored it for you and then finally said, hey, remember this? So yeah, heartily recommended. Anybody that's got a few bucks to throw around, what's the price on this? $11.95 US, $14.95 Canadian. You really can't do better. And definitely get to the part of the story with the gardener in her panties and see if you don't agree with me that no, this isn't a gardener in her panties. This is a voyeur staring at something that he's got absolutely no right to stare at. Okay, that'll do it for the weekly update for Friday, May 10th. And next week we'll get back to the arduous editing and narrating of the Green Lantern Green Dante inking of the cover, God willing.